I don't want peace. I want problems, always.
I thought Kevin Feige and Marvel said that this was supposed to be a grounded street-level movie, but it turned into X-Men setup?
He's full of shit.
Spider-Man Brand New Day is a fantastic Spider-Man movie whenever it's actually allowed to be one. At its best, it delivers the most comic-accurate version of Tom Holland's Peter Parker that we've seen so far. The action is incredible, Tom gives his best performance as the character, and Peter's emotional journey is some of the strongest writing in the MCU. I mean, for the first half of the film, I was like,
I'm about to bust.
But unfortunately, this movie is constantly interrupted by what feels like an X-Men setup movie masquerading as a Spider-Man story. Jean Grey is responsible for nearly every major issue the film has, from broken plot logic to confusing morality and characterization that doesn't resemble the Jean Grey fans know from the comics. If Marvel had simply made someone who's supposed to be evil, like Scorpion or Mr. Negative, the primary villain, rather than a core member of the X-Men whose character is assassinated, this honestly might have been one of the best Spider-Man movies ever made. Maybe the best. Instead, we're left with a movie that's simultaneously one of the strongest Spider-Man movies and also one of the most frustrating. Now, I'm glad people are enjoying the movie, but my lord, the glaze is insane. The amount of people saying this is even close to the level of Spider-Man 2 need to be put in a psych ward alongside Jean.
You're smoking crack. Something is wrong with you people!
Now I'm breaking down this review into 3 parts, the pros, the cons, and an entire section about Jean Grey herself, and there's timestamps if you want to jump ahead to any part. Now let's start with the pros, the biggest for me being Tom Holland finally feels like Spider-Man. Ever since Homecoming, I've enjoyed Tom's portrayal of the character, even if I had my fair share of Iron Boy Jr. complaints, but No Way Home changed everything. Peter sacrificed everyone he loved, including Aunt May, and erased himself from the lives of MJ and Ned to save the multiverse. That ending promised a version of Peter Parker who would finally have to stand completely by himself. Brand New Day finally delivers on that promise. Aging Peter into his mid-20s was absolutely the right call, as it creates narrative distance from the previous trilogy. He's living alone and intentionally isolating himself because he refuses to let anyone else suffer the way Aunt May did. It isn't a glamorous life, it feels tragic, and that's exactly how Spider-Man should be portrayed. For the first time in the MCU, Peter genuinely feels like his own man, and in all of the quiet moments, you can feel the weight of his sacrifice on his face. Now let's talk about the action. The action scenes are easily the best in Tom Holland's movies, and the practical stunt work makes a massive difference. One of the biggest complaints I've had with MCU Spidey is how bad the CGI looks when it comes to the Spider-Man movements and the fighting, all that stuff. You can tell Destin Daniel Cretton took heavy inspiration from Insomniac's Spider-Man games. Spider-Man fights with speed and momentum, utilizes his web shooters, and regularly uses combo moves that are straight out of the PlayStation game. The impact of each hit has weight, and I don't feel like I'm watching flimsy CGI stand-ins since Cretton utilizes practical effects as much as possible. The web swinging has real weight and is super fluid, and it just feels right for the character. The action here rivals that of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I think has the best overall action and visuals for any Spider-Man live-action entry. Also, the cinematography is filled with color instead of the typical MCU sludgy gray, and sits on the action well instead of using way too many cuts. This is the best Spider-Man has looked in the MCU, and it's not even close.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
I actually went into this movie hoping Marvel would move on from MJ and Ned and introduce other iconic characters from the Spider-Man comics like Gwen Stacy, Black Cat, the Osborns, but since they decided to include both of them again, this is easily the best either character has ever been written in my opinion. MJ finally feels like an actual person instead of the perpetually awkward, emotionally detached teen from the previous trilogy. Ned likewise feels like his own character rather than existing solely to be supporting Peter. Their scenes with Peter are absolutely heartbreaking because they remind us what No Way Home cost him, and while it was great to see him hanging out with them again after so much painful isolation, it serves as a bittersweet reminder that things will never be the same. It's a reminder of the harsh realities of growing up and being an adult. The rooftop scene with Peter and MJ is phenomenal. For one moment, it feels like MJ has broken through the spell and Peter might finally get back the life he's been yearning for, only for the reveal that Jean Grey possessed MJ and it was all a lie. That got me in every sense of the word. And then there's the scene where MJ discovers the letter Peter wrote after No Way Home, and he finally admits what he's been holding onto for years. He says, "I love you," and MJ simply responds, "I don't remember you, and I don't love you." Tom Holland absolutely sells this moment. You can see Peter trying not to break down in front of her as the utter despair in his soul is starting to creep up, and Tom Holland was acting his ass off this entire movie, and I gotta give him props, especially for this scene. And if you've ever had someone you were interested in reject you, I mean, shit, how can you not relate to this? Another huge improvement is that New York finally feels like an actual character in this movie. One of the things I love about Raimi's Spider-Man films is that the civilians add so much texture to the city and make Spider-Man a far more personable character. There's a ton of focus on him saving people rather than just face-offs with villains. It makes Peter feel like a genuine neighborhood hero rather than a larger-than-life figure. I think it's something a lot of the recent films have lost, but this film does a good job on making New Yorkers feel like an active part of the narrative. Spider-Man gives them hope, and their support feeds Peter the strength to keep going. Also, Spider-Man isn't operating in an isolated bubble anymore. Punisher, Hulk, Scorpion, Tombstone, Boomerang, Tarantula, it genuinely feels like a living Marvel universe where dozens of heroes and villains occupy the same city. It feels like I'm really watching a living comic book. My only complaint is that several of these characters barely exist beyond a glorified cameo.
And it's gone.
We've waited almost 10 years to finally see MCU Scorpion become a legitimate threat, and he's barely in the movie.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Honestly, I think Scorpion should have been the primary antagonist, but I'll get into that later in the cons. Let's talk a little bit about the Punisher and the Hulk. Both of these characters thematically represent different issues Peter is dealing with in this movie: loss and embracing one's true self. I really enjoyed Peter's relationship with Frank Castle. On paper, they're complete opposites, but both men are defined by loss. Frank has no family left, and neither does Peter. They're both lonely and provide some sense of companionship to one another. But Frank also serves as a warning of what Peter could become if he completely isolates himself. One of my favorite lines is when Frank essentially tells Peter that being alone isn't freedom, it's a curse. Even though this version of Punisher is noticeably softer than he was in Daredevil, it works because Frank clearly sees Peter like a younger brother. Although he's been far more adversarial with the likes of Daredevil, Peter is a kid coming into his own, and I think the part of Frank that used to be a father can't help but have a soft spot for him. Just because the Punisher is brutal in his tactics, he is ultimately so vicious to those who harm the innocent because he cares so much, and this is why he cares about Peter. Thanks to Frank, Peter begins to see that the complete abandonment of Peter Parker and failing to nurture any personal relationships will only yield harmful results. As for Hulk, it was awesome to see the Savage Hulk back. Professor Hulk is one of the worst creative decisions I've ever forced to bear witness to, and I pray to God we never have to see that version of the character again. The fight between him, Spider-Man, and Punisher was great, and my only real complaint is that it was far too short and could have easily served as the final battle of the film if the story was restructured. Additionally, the Hulk serves as a representation of running from your true nature. Bruce Banner was doing everything to suppress the Hulk, but when Jean let him loose, there was no Banner, only Hulk. Bruce is a man constantly at war with the two sides of himself, and that struggle mirrors Peter's own identity crisis throughout the film. Peter has tried to bury Peter Parker deep inside himself, convincing himself that only Spider-Man deserves to exist. That emotional repression begins to manifest physically as his body mutates, giving him organic web shooters, a stronger Spidey sense, and better strength and agility. But Peter can't fully embrace Spider-Man either. Rather than accepting these changes as part of who he is, he desperately searches for a way to reverse them and return to the comfortable status quo he knows. Like Banner, he's trapped between two identities, refusing to accept either one completely. By the end of the film, Peter realizes he doesn't have to choose between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. They aren't two separate people fighting for control. They're both essential parts of who he is, and only by embracing both parts of himself can he finally become the person he's meant to be.
Yeah, I'm both. Yeah, I had a drink. Yeah, I smoke.
Now, let's move on to the cons. For the most part, these can be boiled down into three major problems: Peter's financial situation, the ramifications of the superpower inhibitor, and most blatantly, Jean Grey herself.
You're such a bad person. Like, all the way through to your core.
The first two kind of go hand in hand. Peter supposedly has no money, yet somehow he's living in an apartment equipped with technology that's on the level of Tony Stark. He has an advanced AI assistant, futuristic fabrication equipment, and enough scientific hardware to develop a gene inhibitor capable of suppressing Omega-level mutant powers.
You serious?
And as if this isn't hard enough to believe, Peter doesn't have a job. How is he paying for any of this, let alone the apartment? 2026 rent prices don't come with a superhero discount last time I checked, unless perhaps there's a Spidey OnlyFans account subplot that's in the director's cut. If Marvel had simply explained that this equipment was based on Stark tech that Peter had experience with and was able to recreate, I could buy it. It seems similar to the machine in No Way Home that was used to make cures for the villains, but we needed at least a throwaway line to address this. And as for the money to afford it all, it's believable Aunt May had life insurance or Tony left him some money, but considering Peter is supposed to be a working class hero, it's weird that Tom Spidey isn't working at the Bugle, delivering pizzas, or even delivering Amazon packages swinging around the city. I think that could have been fun to see and would add to Peter's character immensely, to see him balance being a full-time superhero and trying to earn a paycheck. This brings us to the inhibitor. This is world-changing technology, and yet Peter invents it easily, without setbacks or experimentation. Something this revolutionary needed far more development and focus considering the enormous consequences it brings with it.
I told you there'd be consequences!
It's a technology capable of taking away superpowers. This fundamentally alters the balance of power in the MCU, and yet the ramifications are barely discussed.
The hierarchy of power is about to change.
Peter never seems to wrestle with the ethical implications of what he's created, making the entire subplot feel underdeveloped despite its massive importance to the future of the universe. It's also telegraphed from a mile away that this tech is eventually going to be weaponized. Whether it's damage control, the government, or some other organization, there's almost no chance the inhibitor won't be used against the mutants and other superpowered individuals in future entries. It feels like an obvious setup for Avengers vs. X-Men, or even a second Civil War sometime in the future. And while that can work, my bigger issue is that Spider-Man is the one responsible for creating this tech. I'd much rather this invention be created by Boulevard Trask or Norman Osborn. Having Peter create this type of device will drag him further into the overarching MCU plotline when this movie, and Spider-Man stories in general, are best when he is focused on street-level threats. I don't need Spider-Man spearheading the next Avengers lineup or becoming the architect of the MCU's next crossover event. I just want to watch Peter Parker be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, protecting New York and helping ordinary people. That's where the character has always been at his strongest, and we've spent an entire trilogy getting the character to this point, so I don't want this storyline to get sidetracked by anything. And now for the big story-breaking issue with Brand New Day. Jean Grey should not be the villain, and she shouldn't be in this story at all.
Oh my God. Get him the fuck out of here. Get him the, please.
I think Scorpion or Mr. Negative would have been a lot better to face Spidey, since they are clear-cut villains. Jean is treated a lot like Wanda, where her horrific actions are justified by the writers because of the pain she's endured, when that's simply not an excuse for the crimes she commits and the people she hurts in this movie.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
This lack of accountability damages the narrative overall. Plus, the plot completely falls apart the moment you start asking simple questions. If Jean's goal was reaching Metzger, why doesn't she simply follow him home and possess him there? Even if he had guards, she could simply possess each one in succession until she reached him. And if she didn't want to track him home, why doesn't she mind control the guards at the damage control headquarters when Metzger's in the office?
Well, it's funny you should. I mean, George, they're onto us!
Instead, she possesses hundreds of civilians, steals a tank, breaks Scorpion out of prison, possesses the Hulk, destroys half the city damn near, all to accomplish something she could have done easily without any of these steps.
What, are you retarded?
This plot hole shatters the story in almost every facet and makes Jean seem like an absolute moron. And beyond this, the movie characterizes her as an evil person who harms innocent people without any regard for anyone else. Yet we're supposed to sympathize with her because of her trauma?
You're an irredeemable monster!
What took you so long, idiot?
That isn't to say Jean is some perfect person in the X-Men comics, but I'm almost positive she didn't casually manipulate innocent people, treating them like meat puppets. She forces a man into traffic to get hit by a car for no other reason than to be vindictive and auriform. She clearly does not have any regard for the innocent, and even if that man didn't die getting hit by the car nor anyone else when her psychic attack freezes thousands of people, she causes thousands of people harm, whether she intended to or not, and at the very least, it shows her complete indifference toward whether innocent people survive or are hurt. There's no doubt that the general public are going to despise mutants now, and if I lived in the MCU, I would be on the front lines of a protest to lock her ass up in the lowest level of a prison as deep as the Empire State Building is tall. If this was all a clunky setup to make the public fear mutants in the MCU, surely there was a far better way to do this without bastardizing a beloved member of the X-Men. Way to go, Marvel. You portrayed one of your core heroes as an evil piece of garbage. Additionally, the film never seriously engages with the moral horror of what she's doing. Mind control isn't treated as a horrifying violation of another person's autonomy, which is insane not to address. None of the civilians consent to be controlled, and the movie has no interest in approaching this complexity.
No, I don't really feel like it.
Not to mention, she makes MJ kiss Peter when she's unconscious, which is super grapey. When Jean mind controls someone in the comics or other media, typically it's in the pursuit of justice and saving lives. A lot of times she's trying to subdue a dangerous villain, but Jean in this movie manipulates people who had nothing to do with the abduction of her sister, and the film acts as though this is understandable because of her grief. The final problem is that Jean never really faces true consequences. She realizes she was wrong, and that's pretty much it. She doesn't even really apologize. Peter forgives her, Punisher lets her leave, and this makes both of them complicit in her crimes in a way. Nobody holds her accountable despite the destruction she caused. I think a lot of this could be forgiven if Jean actually apologized for everything and turned herself in and went to prison. And then we could see Professor X's wheelchair roll up to the jail cell, starting her journey of learning to use her powers for good. But without any consequences for her, the morality of the movie feels largely wrong thematically. Spider-Man faces more consequences for his actions than Jean does.
No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.
And her inclusion is a rot to this story that infects almost every facet to the point where I find it hard to ignore the film's immense problems. And that's ultimately what makes Brand New Day so frustrating. Buried inside this movie is one of the best Spider-Man films ever made. Tom Holland gives his strongest performance yet as the character. The action is phenomenal. New York feels alive. Peter's loneliness is heartbreaking and effective, and the payoff he has, embracing both himself and Spider-Man, is incredibly well done. But every time the movie builds momentum, it's dragged down by Jean Grey, who riddles the movie with plot holes, muddled morality, and a terrible characterization that is nothing like her comic counterpart. If Jean had been handled with greater nuance, or if Marvel had simply built the movie around a more grounded Spider-Man villain like Scorpion, who gets shelved and really does nothing after a decade of build-up, I honestly think Brand New Day would be in contention for the best live-action Spider-Man film ever made. But, as it stands, it's a messy but fun movie that was close to greatness, but gets worse the more you think about it. It's a lot of peak with a whole lot of problems. Thank you so much for sticking with the video this long. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and help me reach my 5K sub goal. And I want to hear your thoughts about the movie in the comments. Did you love Brand New Day? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Who do you hope to see in the sequels? Maybe Norman and Harry Osborn? Black Cat? Again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, may the Force be with you, always.